is in bloom. The PR transmissions will assume they'll try to push drugs to keep us all dumbed down and hope that they will never see the truth around. Another promise, another scene, another package lie to keep us trapped in greed. Another green bells wrapped around our minds, and endless red tape to keep the truth confined. They will not force us. They will stop degrading us. They will not control us. We will be victorious.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. Tonight, I have a guest who has joined me many times, Mr. Chuck Modi, awesome journalist, who is, if you are on Twitter and you don't follow him, you need to now, because he's always at amazing protests and always actually does something not too many of us do, which is talks to the people, not just films the event, but actually talks to the people who attend or speak or support, because that is what it's all about. So thank you so much for coming back, Chuck. I always love to have you.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we have been very, involved with this, the Free Palestine ceasefire, what I would call a movement at this point, for sure. And I know from, the times you've been on before, I could be interpreted as a pessimist, but I consider it a realist. How I would just, I was like, until we get in the streets like Europe, nothing's ever going to change. But holy shit, has US been holding it down?
Oof. Yeah. I mean, it's been amazing, but unfortunately, what prompted it is wholesale genocide that we could all see in front of our faces. So as many people that are in the street is still not nearly enough, considering what we're seeing and considering how blatant it is. Which is not to say genocide and Israeli apartheid has always been a crime against humanity. But for those who have had wool over their eyes for so many years, Israel has made that next to impossible. Cell phones have made that impossible. So how long could you lie to yourself? And that's why you're seeing all these people out here.
Absolutely. So initially, I think I see who's here. Oh, hello, Jessica. So initially, I just want to play this clip. This is from the local news. They took a few snippets of what I said in like 10 minutes, of course. And they interviewed other people at the protest we had at Harrisburg the other day. And it was on Sunday. It was interesting because that was my third protest in 3 different cities within a week. So it was interesting to see how things were different and if there was like a common mood throughout. But I want you to see if anything stands out to you about the way this is covered. Okay. So yeah, Matt, if you could give that a play.
On the steps of the state capitol in Harrisburg today, dozens from across the mid-state rallied in support of Palestine. This as aid begins to trickle into Gaza. Sarah Wilson reports.
Emotions were high. There were rallying cries to free the Palestinian people and end the Israeli airstrikes. The protesters telling me this is not a Jewish or Muslim issue. It's a humanitarian one.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Gaza! Free, free Gaza!
Calls for peace outside the state capitol.
Innocent lives being taken. Everyone should stand against that.
as the war between Israel and Hamas enters its third week.
I feel as helpless as all of you standing here.
Dozens rallied in support of the Palestinian people, many of whom are bearing the brunt of Israeli airstrikes, which were launched after attacks from Hamas. Since the war began, Israel says over 1,300 civilians in the country have died. According to the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza, over 4,300 Palestinians have also been killed.
Gaza is just being decimated.
Protesters demanding a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and calling on more aid for Gazans.
Because 20 trucks is not enough for 2 million people whose water, electricity, food, internet, basic human necessities has been cut off.
It's very, very difficult.
Imtiaz Zarab fled Gaza in 2014 during Israel's third war against Hamas. She came here alone and terrified and still has family and friends back home.
I lost one of my cousin, and another one, he lost his 2 kids and 12 members of his family.
She's desperate to get in touch with loved ones.
I try to call them, but it's very hard. They don't have electricity, they don't have internet.
For her and so many others, the war isn't about taking sides.
This is the issue is for every human being.
It's about innocent civilians suffering.
This is about humanity. You either stand with humanity or you don't. It's that simple.
This was the second pro-Palestinian rally outside the state capitol. There was one last week that ended in chaos. A man allegedly pulled up to protesters in his car, yelled racial slurs, and pointed a gun at them. He was later arrested. Police this time not taking any chances. There were multiple officers outside the capitol. In the studio, Sarah Wilson, ABC 27 News.
So I'm curious if you, I mean, I know because I was there, I know there's some things that are like so off with that, but is there anything that stood out to you? I'm curious as far as like being a little skewed or something like that.
Well, listen, I mean, we have to look at the media landscape that has been pro-Israel forever. So I'm actually a little surprised, to be honest with you, just to have a Palestinian interviewed. Talking about the fact that's amazing,
right?
So I'm like, wow, 7. Now we'll say this: in my experience in protests, the local affiliates have far more leeway to cover what they want than the national ABC. They have a certain amount of autonomy. So first of all, I want to give even ABC credit for just airing that. But I've noticed, like, when I covered George Floyd protests, right, and all of the national media was horrible all across the board, but NBC4 there was the fairest. I'm not going to say they don't have bosses and they don't have to answer to people, but in that period, we knew if it went on NBC Local 4, there were a couple of good reporters, it would be far less skewed. Let's just put it that way. They have to do some things their editors say, but they'll at least interview, the protest perspective. So I think that's what happened here. But it's almost shocking to see, even as an affiliate, interview a Palestinian.
Absolutely. The gentleman who they had a clip of speaking, he's the nephew of the woman who had the gun put to her head last week at the Capitol. He was there when it happened. Because, well, first of all, there was over 100 people there, and they took a shot of the crowd from the side. Whereas if you guys look at my channel and you see the live stream, I filmed from the back and the front, and there's way more people than it looks like. But the thing is, the fact that there was over 100 people, this was not on social media because they were scared, understandably. So I got word of mouth the night before. This was like this overnight, just word of mouth. And that's how strong the community is with people who are standing by Free Palestine. So within a matter of hours, all of us got out there. And, here's the kicker, and I want to know if you've ever heard of this in your time covering actions. So I'm told by a woman of color who I've organized many actions with in Harrisburg that the cops, they did ask for cops to be there, which I understand. Usually we're like, but like this is different. And the cops said to them, it would be $70 per hour per cop, a minimum of 4 hours. So while they're being paid on duty, you would have to pay an additional $70 per cop per hour out of pocket.
What if you refuse?
They won't come.
I've heard of what you're talking about, but I guess, DC is a different landscape. We ain't paying no cops nothing, period.
Right?
End of story. They get paid enough. They get paid too much, already strangulating the budget. So, I mean, I've heard of that, but no.
I have never heard of that. My mind was like, what?
I have heard of it. It's ridiculous. I think the DC, you have permitted rallies, you have unpermitted rallies. In the George Floyd rallies, like there was almost a code. And there were different types. There was a code. No, we don't ask for permission for cops. We don't do that. We don't.
Hell no.
We're against police terror. We're not asking for permission. We're marching. Period.
Yep.
End of story. And that was sort of the attitude throughout 2020.
It was crazy, but I did see. Let me see if I can read that. I can't read the comment. One of the things that was really interesting was that, people there were so, God, I've never felt such solidarity, especially
it was amazing.
In last Wednesday in DC. That day changed my life, literally.
Wait, last Wednesday. So that's when all the Jewish folks came down during the week. Yes, that was. Well, tell me finish your thought why it changed your life, because that's a big statement.
Oh, I was just gonna say the Jewish Voices for Peace. My God, and I'm having a few of them on next week. 500 of them get arrested in civil mass obedience.
Yeah,
that I don't know of another time in our lifetime within the United States that many people. I mean, I'm sure depending on age. But
was that the number 500?
Yep.
Wow.
So it's like, I mean, and just, I'm a humanist. I'm not religious in any regard whatsoever, but I caught myself praying with them and stuff like that, because it was such a spiritual day. And it was just I just felt so connected.
Yeah.
And I was so moved by, there is such a rhetoric online, especially that you are anti-Semitic if you don't, support Israel. And here are these people, and they're saying, you know what? Not in our name. You will not use our pain and our grief to exploit what is going on. This is against everything we believe in. And I don't know if you saw, but yesterday, over 300 Holocaust survivors and their children came out as Free Palestine.
What city did that happen?
Oh, I just meant like by writing.
Oh, that's it's a beautiful thing. I mean,
over 300 Holocaust survivors.
Listen, I felt a certain amount of pride because I don't see myself. I'm an anti-Zionist Jew. I grew up Jew. I grew up in Holocaust movies. I watched Holocaust movies. I didn't have a religious family, but any Jewish family, there are things that are consistent. It doesn't matter what your nationality is. Don't matter where you're from. We've all heard 6 million. So don't tell me data doesn't matter now when I talk about all the Palestinians being murdered and the disparity. Now you don't want to talk about numbers. I've been raised on 6 million, but now you don't want to talk about numbers. No, we've always talked about numbers. Let's be clear. And 6 million aren't the only 2 words we've heard. Every Jew heard never again. We heard never again. You were raised on never again. Not never again just to Jewish people, never getting to anyone. So if you're an anti-racist protest, I'm telling you, you're going to see a far greater representation of Jews amongst white people, sometimes 50% of white people, and that comes from that upbringing. And yet, Jews, like any other predominantly white group, and I say predominantly white group because there are not all Jews are white, right?
Right.
So I say that, but at the same time, we know that every white group has its racists, has its bigots, has its right-wingers, and Jews are no different in that regard. But the difference is when you turn on your TV, you only see Zionist Jews. You see Israel controlling the media, Israel, AIPAC controlling the media. Not to be confused with Jews, by the way. AIPAC, a lobby. Christians United for Israel. They're Christians. They're help control the media. The military-industrial complex controls the media. This is all tied together because what this is really about is having missiles in Israel, and that is why there's unconditional support for Israel. We're talking about missiles in the Middle East. So we got to be clear on that. But that day, and I was in the rotunda, and I was the first to film. I was right there, and it was beautiful. I mean, it was beautiful because if you're Jewish, you have an extra responsibility, and any privileged group has a responsibility to speak out. If you're white, you have a responsibility to speak out about racism. If you're a man, you have a responsibility to speak out about sexism. It goes for every ism, because it shouldn't be this way, but you get a better hearing. You're heard more, which is part of the discrimination. That why do I need to say something to have validation? So all that exists. But with Jews, there's an extra layer in that anyone who's not Jewish is accused of anti-Semitism, falsely accused of anti-Semitism. And so when you have thousands, because there were thousands, I filmed over a couple thousand Jews there that week. Thousands come to DC. All right, let's talk about anti-Semitism. When you have Holocaust survivors, oh, you're going to tell me about anti-Semitism? No, you don't get to do that here. Sorry, that trick won't work. That lie won't work here. And that's why it was so important to show that Zionism is the opposite of Judaism. And Judaism is the opposite of Zionism. And people came to DC to make that clear, to say not in our name, and one Holocaust does not deserve another, and never again means never again to anyone. Let's be clear on what those two words mean. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many similarities that were brought up that were just, that's so heartbreaking. Like, you know, when I was in Lancaster, PA for the one protest, we all wrote our names on our hands, and they were like, we'll explain at the end of it. And then they were like, this is what people are doing there so their bodies can be better identified. And like, you're seeing all these pictures of little babies with like their names written on their legs and stuff. And it's like, that is Jewish people like understand they don't want this. They don't. And you see how many people in Israel are saying, no, we don't want this. And I think that's such a, such a just, and I think it's on purpose, but people are very much like, you hate the people of Israel. No, we don't. Their government. It's their government.
And there are many anti-Zionist Jews who are repressed in Israel, who I know they've passed some laws in the last couple of weeks legalizing what they're already doing. But if you followed it over the years, anti-Zionists have been repressed. I mean, don't get me wrong. Palestinians have always gotten the worst brunt, and I always want to lead there. But people know that. People don't actually know there's a contingent of anti-Zionist Jews who fear for their careers, their life, could be imprisoned. So it's very difficult. And, you know, just to give you a landscape in DC, I've been covering Free Palestine protests for 10 years now. 2014 was my first time I came out. I used to believe lies. There's atrocities on both sides. This is what my parents told me. I was brainwashed. And I started looking at the math. And I tell everyone, look at the facts first. Look at the objective facts first. And 2014, if you remember, there was just such a massacre. and that there
Yeah.
were 1,500 civilians who are Palestinian murdered, but only 6 Israelis. 500 children to 1. 500 to 1. That's a massacre. 1,500 to 6. That's a massacre. Civilians. That's what I said. Not Hamas, not soldiers, civilians. So I start with math and I'm like, okay, this atrocity that's on both sides, it doesn't seem like it's on both sides. And I start doing, research very quickly. And I say, I'm done. I am done being complicit. I'm getting out in the street and I'm going to start talking to people and filming people. And over the years, it's funny, ironically, Dr. Cornel West was at that 2014 rally, the only public figure there. And in 2014, it was a little more career suicide for anyone to be out there. I was even nervous myself. I knew at that moment in time, you know what? I ain't going to make it anywhere in mainstream. And I got it. But everyone out there knows that. But what I want to say is, for a lot of people who think this just started, Palestinians have been leading this protest for 10 years now. I mean, much more than 10 years, right? But there's been a movement. And even the BDS movement has been wonderful and has educated a lot of people. And that's been going on. And if you read some of the books, they'll say, we're winning. And you're like, what? Your book starts with we're winning? Yeah, we're actually shaking it up. And this is like 5-6 years ago. So I've been covering Palestinians, Maryland to Palestine. They're a local group that's always out there leading protests. And at some of the bigger ones, you also see a lot of Jews there in solidarity. That's not new either. What is new is the scale. I mean, we had massive protests in May 2021, 5 in a month every Saturday, unfortunately, in response to Israeli murders and massacres. That's usually how it goes. But this scale, people are waking up. We have cell phones now. We don't have to believe CNN. Lies, disgusting lies about human shields. We don't have to absorb the lies. We have eyes and we can see. I just been ableist there, so I apologize what I just did. By the way, I'm talking. But anyway, you get my point. We know what is going on, and you can't hide. You can't hide. And as the chant goes, Biden, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide. Same for Netanyahu. And that was the chant that's been going on everywhere. And it's about time we say that. We say that clearly. And no, we don't vote for genocidal maniacs, no matter what party you're in, period.
And I saw we both shared the same thing earlier today. That was like, in Michigan, they're a swing state. I'm in Pennsylvania. We're a swing state. I didn't vote for his last time, and I'm not going to vote for him even harder this time. So they're like, oh, he lost like a lot of the Muslim and Arab vote. Well, good. I mean,
yeah, he's losing the Jewish vote too.
Yeah, good. Like, you're running him. That's your problem. But, you do have the people that are like, even though, elections like not even here, but they're like, but Trump. And it's like, that is not even a concern right now. Like, dude is scary. That's in right now. So it's like
saying my guy is less genocidal than your guy.
Right?
It's not a presidential qualification.
Yeah. Seriously.
What are we doing here? And you know what's the crazy thing? Let's say I was with the Democratic Party. I'm not. I've seen how terrible they are. But let's say I was with. Wouldn't my response be, hey, let's run someone else who's not a genocidal maniac against him? There's still a primary. Like, wouldn't that be your logical response? Not, oh, we're going to still run the guy who's supporting Israeli apartheid and giving them billions of dollars to murder children in front of our eyes. Like, where is your morality? Where are your ethics? Where's your humanity? How low can you go? How depraved is your pragmatism that you won't even primary Biden?
Yeah.
And vote for him. What is wrong with you? I'm sorry. You did it to yourself. He did it to himself. The Democratic Party did it to themselves. You have a party that is ridiculous. The Republicans are horrible. The Democrats are horrible. And we don't split hairs on genocidal maniacs.
Yep. And I think, I didn't say it the day we went to that rally last Wednesday, but there was something that was very bothersome to me, but I didn't want to kill the mood because it was such a beautiful day.
Yeah.
Rashida Tlaib speaking, obviously, so hard to listen to. You know, she's dealing with some horrible pain right now. It
Yeah.
is intense, it is palpable. Cori Bush, however, standing there yelling about no more war, no more funding for war, when she has voted nonstop for this Ukraine
Mhm.
war budget, it was really hard for me.
Okay.
Did you talk to anyone else who kind of had that sentiment?
Well, I was in the rotunda when that was happening. When
Oh, okay.
I had to make a decision. You know, we always got to make video decisions. Do I stay outside? But people are like, we're going to Rotunda and we're going to fill that up. And I'm like, that's where I need to be. And it blew up. I
Yeah.
had like 10 million views. So it was the place to be. It was the breaking news.
Yeah.
I'm gonna soften the stance on Cori Bush. And let me have full disclosure for a second. I actually know Cori going years back, prior to when she was in the House. And when I met Cori, we were both getting tear gassed by Ferguson police officers. And I covered other marches and other Jason Stockley. The world doesn't really know about Jason Stockley, but he's another huge protest in 2017. Interviewed her many times. Doing community violence rallies, doing anti-police terror rallies. So she comes out of the movement. And so I always want to say that ahead of time. Not that to say I'm biased, because if she takes certain stances, I would come out against. But I always want to have full disclosure on that, in that I do know her activist past, and I've been part of it.
Oh, so do I.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
why I donated to her. And
Right.
I was like, yes, we need
Right.
her. We need her.
So
So
let me kind of defend her. Here's why I defend her. On Palestine, she has been steadfast since day one. She has never, ever budged. And she was the first one. And she made a pioneering speech on the floor and getting death threats all over the place. And this isn't like now. It's like right when she came in, and all the Zionists, everybody was coming after her. And her next time she ran, political opponents, AIPAC put all the money into her opponent. She still won. And what here's, and I'm going to get to the Ukraine point in a second, but I have to honor that courage, knowing what that pushback comes with. And as a media person, part of my job and our job is to try to mainstream issues that are not mainstream. You know, there was a time Medicare for All polled at 24%, not that long ago, like 10 years ago, right? Or 9 years ago. And then it hits around 70%, right? So we try to mainstream issues that we know are morally correct, but the world does not. And so when a public figure, or more mainstream figure, or someone in the House takes it, I know everyone on the left is like, oh my God, this is what the hypocrisy, da 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 da. And from a media point of view, I'm like, oh, we're penetrating now. We're penetrating. That means more followers who are more mainstream are going to come on board on this issue. And I want that. I want that. So I want to say on Palestine, she has always been steadfast, never wavered, not one bad vote from the beginning. And part of that comes from in Ferguson, folks in Gaza were giving folks in Ferguson tips. And she has spoken about this on the House floor about Bassem. Bassem was a videographer, rest in peace. He passed a couple of years later, who was a big part of the Ferguson movement and doing media. Everybody knew Bassem. He was Palestinian. And there were some serious Palestinian Ferguson connections made. And she was part of that. So I want to give that context. There's that and then so there's in your point in Ukraine. I've heard a lot. She can be critiqued on Ukraine. She absolutely could. And I'll just say this. I'm not defending the vote, but I'm probably explaining it. When Bernie chose not to stop the war in Ukraine, chose his bad vote, he kind of left the squad out to dry. Meaning, so if any squad member, and people are going to be like, you're being way too generous, but whatever. When Bernie did that, he took the cover away. And if any of those squad members voted, it would have been their career. There's no question about it. So I'm not saying, oh, it's okay, but I'm saying we have to have an understanding that that protest vote, any one of those people knew their career would be over. And you might say, well, you know what? Then make your career over. Do that protest vote. That's fine. That's good. But I do want to say why you didn't see anyone when because Bernie was always a cover. Bernie was the blanket. He's a white man. He's been in there decades. Now you just have a few, no one's white, but predominantly black women and women of color who are getting all the brunt for everything. And Bernie wouldn't even put cover. So I blame first Bernie on that because he left them out hanging out to dry, which doesn't mean I'm absolving those votes. I'm just giving a context that I don't always hear. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely bring up some good points. I think that my main issue, and you know, you could certainly watch the coverage. I think my main issue with Corey's speech was that it was not about Palestine. It was about war as a whole.
Oh, I see.
And she kept saying, no more war, period. No more war funding, period. Things like that. And I'm like,
but
okay.
You voted for war funding. Is that that's what you're saying?
Right. I mean, anyone who comes out for East Palestine, bring it, you know, but it was the absolutes. That's what was just, it was.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't clap. I can't clap for this. I can't.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you can watch it, but that was my point. But no, I mean, I didn't know that about Ferguson, actually. That's really interesting.
I have a bunch of videos of her back in the day, and even the day before her election, I did a video of her before the election. I would always go up to, you know what I do. I went up to you when you were down in DC for Medicare for All. I came up to you. I said, why are you out here today? Well, I did that with Corey. I did in 2014. She did, but people don't know this, but not only was she a strong figure against policing, but she had a lot of community violence rallies, you know, because they always say, oh, what are you doing about community violence? The truth is, people in the against the police terror are often the same people doing community violence rallies. They won't tell you that. They don't care because they're not asking for that reason. They're asking to excuse police murder and police violence. But that's the truth. So, yeah, she put in some work. And, you know, I mean, once you go in the machine, I think we could argue that she's been the most left person in Congress. I think you could say that safely, that many squad members, that she's wavered the least. Everyone wavered on Ukraine without exception. And when Bernie did, everyone could fold it. Outside of that, I think she's been pretty consistent. If I'm wrong about the votes, I know someone afterwards will tell me. But I just want to put that context out there.
I mean, that's valid. I appreciate that. What is some of the things maybe that you talk to people about in DC at these rallies that maybe specifically touched you the most?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. There were so many rallies. There were different ways I was touched. I interview a lot of Palestinians. So I start there. I try to always lead with the group that is being directly affected. So even when I put videos out, before I put anyone, I want to put 2 or 3 of Palestinians that I talk to, Palestinian Americans that I talk to, get their perspective. And then I'll, you know, put the rest of the videos out with just anybody who comes. Because you want to show the solidarity. I want the Jewish perspective. Absolutely. That's an important perspective. I want any perspective of any group. I still have a video of Afghan women. I haven't put out there. I'm behind on my videos. I got a job like anybody else. I got to, you know, go back to work and whatever. But anyway, I'm going to put those videos out there. I was moved a few times. I was moved about the Jewish rallies. Jewish-led rallies. That being in the rotunda when everyone's saying not in my name, I was moved. I'm moved when I'm speaking to Palestinians and their courage, to be really quite honest with you. You have to understand something, like, you know, there's privilege even in protest. So I was at the rotunda. You were on the outside in the field. You were listening to the speakers. I was in the rotunda that whole time, interviewing people the whole time. Then I left and I went to it was a Free Palestine rally that evening at the Israel embassy. Right. It was led by young Palestinians. What's the great thing? It was Maryland, Palestine, some others. And immediately you see a huge police presence in a way that didn't exist in the week of Jewish protest. Didn't exist in the rotunda. In the rotunda, didn't exist. didn't exist earlier in the week. On Monday, there were huge protests of Jews. So there were Jews there all week, if not now, when one of the organizations, Jewish Voices for Peace, and thousands of Jews. And there was respect. And then you go to the one led by Palestinians, and police were like in riot gear, up in your face, the same way they were at George Floyd protests. So there was privilege and protest. And I interviewed somebody, I think you might, Raphael. I haven't posted it yet. He was there from New York, and he's a great journalist. And I said, hey, talk to me, give me your thoughts. And he said, well, I haven't been here before, but the police presence here wasn't like it was earlier today. So I'm always reminded of that, and I always want to tell people that. And even while there's great solidarity and that is happening, you know, police are still mimicking the behavior and double standard of Israeli apartheid symbolically and the United States. So that struck me as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was really surprised because having organized in DC before, I was like, wow, there's hardly any cops here. I was glad. But I was like, wow, there's hardly any cops. And it was, of course, entirely peaceful, and everyone was hugging, and
it's white privilege even while we're there.
It is.
Because I've been to so many of these Free Palestine rallies over the last 10 years, led by Palestinian groups. They're the most peaceful things ever. And there's no history of it not being peaceful. So the only indicator that you would have such a police presence is your racism, is your white fear. That's the only reason. And I do want to say one more thing that you're going to hear more clearly at the Palestinian-led protest. It's not, some people are stopping at ceasefire, okay? And that's not, we don't stop at ceasefire and go back to apartheid. No. So we go to it stopped the ceasefire, free Palestine, and the occupation, and Israeli apartheid. You know, we go on. And so you have you're going further, but more directly. And part of that is within the Jewish groups, you had a whole wide range of spectrum of how, you know, far you go. But one thing everyone agrees on is there's no genocide. But we have to be clear. Slow death is just as bad, and just not really. I'm sorry. Slow death is not good either. And that's what Israeli apartheid is. So I think we have to maybe be a little stronger with our language. And where I heard a lot of Jews were stronger with their language, but we can't just leave it a ceasefire. We can't.
No, my God, no. Because this has been going on 75 years.
75 years.
We stop at ceasefire, now what? It's just how it was 3 weeks ago. It's not, I mean.
It's settled.
Yeah, you're totally right.
It's settled colonial, so we have to say that.
It's, you know, there was an interesting post, and it was saying, you know, this isn't a war. This is, you know, because you have one side that has the money and the weapons and such like this, and then you have another side that's like doesn't even have food and water. And someone actually, what's that?
It's not controversial. I mean, but if an alien,
I mean, people make it such.
Yeah. If an alien came on Earth and you told them the facts, they'd be like, what is going on? There are not two sides to this. So the fact that there are two sides speaks to the incredible brainwashing that has happened, not just by lobbyist groups, but really at the root, our military industrial complex. And let me add one thing. In July, not everybody is aware, all but 9 House members signed a resolution and had 3 items in the resolution. And the first was to say Israel is not a racist or not an apartheid state. They went and signed that resolution. And then the third one said, we will always support Israel. Unconditional support. That happened in July. This is being prepped for. All but 9 members of the House, I think most of the squad, 9 members, signed it. Even Betty McCollum, who's been pretty good over the years on Palestine, was a no vote or something like that, which was very, very disappointing because she's been pretty decent. And so they're on record saying that. And that's an important piece.
Yeah.
And this is the leadership that we're dealing with in America. That all 98% of our House and Senate actively support the funding of genocide. Welcome to America.
And there was that vote, I believe it was Thursday, the day after that big protest I went to in DC, where the UN held that vote, and there were 12 yays and 2 abstentions, and then 1 nay, and US was the only nay, and that's why they are not, Palestinians are not getting aid right now, because the United States superseded all of the yays because of its standing with the UN.
That's right.
So it is our doing, only our, as the United States doing. I mean, how do you grapple with that? I kind of, I don't know how to say this, but I'm certainly not proud to be an American right now. Let's put it that way.
Oh no. I was filming something and I had tremendous amount of right wingers in my timeline last 2 days. A couple of right wingers, they take your video and they reframe the words.
Oh,
and like, that's not what you said, right? So I mean, you get flooded. When a Colin Rugg starts tweeting yourself, you just get flooded and inundated. I've been there before, and it was kind of mind blowing how they were being interpreted. Those videos, people were saying, "Oh, deport all of them." I'm like, they're Americans. Like 90% of the people in America, you can't deport, people to their same country. Like, do I have to explain this to you, idiot? And the people were so shocked. They could not believe these thousands were in the street, to the point where I had some people saying, this video is not real. No, this video is not real. I'm like, I stood there for 8 hours straight. I took a lot. You want more videos? I mean, but I bring that up to say is that for a lot of people, it was mind blowing. Because what they see on TV is so drastically different than what's in the streets. So there'd be nothing in their world that would prepare them. Many were saying, oh, this is the first time they came out. Oh, my, this is AstroTurf. I've been covering Free Palestine protests for 10 years. So why don't you talk to actually a journalist who's on the street? Because the people at CNN and MSNBC and Fox, they're not allowed to cover it unless it's negative. Right? But to answer your question, why? It's really very simple. We have missiles in Israel. This is what it really comes down to. Why do Republicans who are racist, who are anti-Semitic, who I don't even think have one Jew, I could be wrong, it was true a couple of years ago, even one Jewish person in the Senate, why are Christians so into Israel? There's some religious white supremacy reasons for that. I'll skip that. But the other big pieces, and Republicans and right-wingers, is because they're militaristic. And they're like, you know what? We like our missiles there. We like having those missiles there in the middle of the Middle East. So essentially, for people who aren't aware, the $4 billion we're sending a year to Israel, the unconditional support we have for Israel, including genocide, is paying rent, $4 billion a year, to house your missiles there. That's what it is, which we've seen the clip of Joe Biden admitting as such a couple decades ago. He said we wish we could have invented Israel. So Israel is about the military-industrial complex. So if you're going against Israel, you're going against some incredible powers. You're going against AIPAC, which in its own right is a ridiculously powerful lobby. It's like the AIPAC is like the NRA, but for both parties, right? That's who AIPAC is. And then you got Christians United for Israel. And I'm skipping over a lot of lobbyists, but John Hagee, he's a really big racist. Let's just put it that way. He's a bigot. He's a white supremacist. He's Christian. People don't know how powerful they are. They are just as powerful as AIPAC, if not more. And they bring in all the right-wing Christians to come in with the right-wing Israelis, those for Israel. So you have this cross-united front. It bothers me when people say Jews is Jews. No, it's not Jews. I'm an anti-Zionist Jew. I don't see myself on TV. I don't see the thousands of anti-Zionist Jews in the street on TV. Jews don't control media. You'd see the anti-Zionist Jews if Jews control media. That's anti-Semitic stuff. Who does control media is the Pentagon. Who does control media are these lobbyist groups that are religious, that are both Jews, Israeli groups, and are Christian groups. And if you understand the geopolitics of it, you'd understand it's much deeper than the anti-Semitic lens that we often hear. And when you're going against empire in that sort of way, ooh, anything is allowed, including genocide.
Yeah. Yeah, you are absolutely right. I think one of the interesting things is, and I think you may have shared this as well. It was a study. I don't always go by like percentages and stuff because it's like,
Yeah.
how many people did you ask and stuff like that. But it was interesting because it said 81% of people over the age of, I believe it was 40, were okay with what was going on. And people under that age, it was something like 34%.
Yeah.
So it very much shows that like the younger people, they're turning to things like this instead of MSM.
Yeah.
So they're not getting that propaganda, that narrative, and they're actually seeing what is going on. And it makes me think, oh my God, before there was independent media and stuff, could you imagine if all this was happening and all we had was the TV?
Well, I can't imagine, because pre-2014, that's exactly what it was. All we heard was
Right.
human shields. Anytime Palestinians died, we heard human shields. And that was going on for decades. If we had cell phones and before 1967, we would be talking about the genocide in 1967. So
Yes.
the game changer here is the cell phone. That's the game changer. All
Yeah.
of these murders, all of these bombings that we get to see now, and courageous journalists on the ground, R.I.P. Shireen Abu Akleh, by the way, who was an incredible Palestinian American journalist who was hit by an Israeli sniper, and probably the most important and famous journalist covering Free Palestine.
Yeah.
It's sad that she can't be covering this right now. But you know what? Cell phones are the game changer. This is what's changed. The same thing that's happening where like white people are learning that black people get shot every day by cops. Don't get me wrong, a lot of white people get shot by cops too. That's the game changer. So you're right. The 65 and older were 81%, they're watching corporate media. Why wouldn't they think that if they don't have any information to counteract it?
And I think you shared this too. Unicorn Riot, they put out a video of this psychopath driving into people who were doing a Free Palestine die-in, and that is scary. And one of the Jewish people who spoke in a Boston rally, who I'll be having next week, Eli, they said that all of this rhetoric is making them as Jewish people feel very unsafe. And that's what I thought of when I saw that. Like, oh my God, like there is this, you are like, when you look at Twitter, even the so-called journalists, they say this anti-Israel rally. No, it's pro-Palestine. That's not like, but that's the
No.
narrative. And then
that's not what they say. They say pro-Hamas. That's what I'm told.
Oh, that's true too.
I'm pro-Hamas, right? First, when I have a critique about Ukraine or a critique about the scores of people warning about NATO expansion over the last 25 years would lead to where we are. And when I say those facts, I'm a Putin puppet. I'm using Putin's talking points. I'm parroting Putin. We get that. Shoot the messenger. And now I'm pro-Hamas. I'm a Jew who's pro-Hamas. These are people who cannot have a factual argument because they don't have the truth on their side. They don't have the facts on their side. And when you don't have any facts on your side, and when genocide is your only side, you have to shoot the messenger. You have to make up lies.
Yeah. My best friend is from Iran, and she's been in the country a decade. And she she said to me, Joy, I want to come to your rallies, but I can't. I don't feel safe. And I totally understood. And in a way, I kind of didn't want her to go just in case something happened.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, but put a fist in the air for me. And it just, I can't remember a time I sobbed that hard, because I realized, holy shit, I have so much privilege to be able to go there and, be able to march with these people and I have to be my friend's voice. She's too scared, understandably. And she has little babies that they're obviously not white. you know?
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking. Have you been able to talk to anyone who has felt unsafe going to these
Oh,
protests?
oh yeah. I'm talking to Palestinians. I mean, I have to walk up to people and say why you're out here, right? And it's sometimes it's a little bit of a shitty job, to be quite honest with you, because people they're going through pain. So if it's someone I know or someone I know, I might ask that person, is everyone in your family all right? Do you have any family over there? A lot of Palestinians have moved, or like in Jordan or in other places around, because of safety reasons, if they're able to get out. But a lot of people lost family members. So it's not just a protest. And you could even see that in the protest, right? It's easier to be maybe more magnanimous and more loving when your brother and your sister and your mother and your father weren't just murdered. You could have a different outlook. But you know what? When you're murdered, it's different. So, people don't like to hear this, but, Ben Norton did a good segment on this. He was talking about international law. According to the UN in 1980 law, Israel apartheid, it is a human rights crime. And we know that from the UN.
Yeah.
We know that from human rights organizations, but we know that from what we see on video. We don't need Human Rights Watch or the UN to tell us this. So this is really important. And they have a legal right to fight back because, as many people have mentioned, there have been nonviolent protests for years and decades. And what happened to the biggest, most nonviolent protest, which is BDS? In America, they started having anti-BDS laws subscribed by both parties, having punishment for your peaceful protest. That if you had a government job, we could get rid of you if you protested for BDS. BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, that's the bedrock of peaceful protests. So when people say, well, why isn't everyone protesting peacefully? They've been protesting peacefully for 75 years.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you still kill them. So you have to put yourself in those shoes. When we tried to do it the nice way, you still killed my family.
Right.
And when you have that lens, I know what America does. I know what happened when America lost 3,000 people. We killed over 1 million Iraqis, which led to almost 6 million lives and $6 trillion. That's American vengeance. So we know how Americans act. And if anything was perpetrated on Americans and America, like has been perpetrated on Palestinians, there would be a scorched earth right now.
Yes, 100%. And then also, 2 days ago, I believe, it came out that within 24 hours, Israel had bombed Palestine, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon within 24 hours. So my question to people is, if this is all about Hamas, why are they bombing other places? Because Hamas is supposed to be in Palestine, but these are Egypt, that's the other one. And these are the places that they told Palestinians to go. If you have 24 hours to try and leave, these are the places they told them to try and go. And now they're being bombed.
Because it has nothing to do with Hamas. Hamas is an excuse. If Hamas,
100%.
As you know, if Hamas was the issue, why would you be bombing children in the West Bank?
Yes.
That's what you're doing. Collective punishment's a war crime. Those little 3-year-old baby militants, that's who you're killing. You're killing everyone. You're starving everyone. So it is clear that you're violating the Geneva Convention. You're violating international law. The defense minister is saying they're human animals. Those were the defense minister's words, not some guy on Twitter, the defense minister. And that's important because when you use language like that to the Israeli government, they're not committing a human rights crime. And you want to know why? Because they don't consider Palestinians human. And you
The
know what that
children
sounds
of
like?
light and the children of dark from the
Yes.
human jungle.
And you know who knows that? Jewish people know that, because
Yep.
that's what they did in the Holocaust. They called us vermin. They called us animal. We were animals. So when you make someone not human, then you can do anything to them. And it's very interesting because in the late 1800s, even in this country, when abolitionists were starting to make some noise with slavery, there were some very quote unquote respectable scientists of the day who spoke very reasonably that slavery was the best of bad options. And you could go back in history, you could find all of this. And they talked about it in that way where they made Black people lower on the human life form. They said they're not fully human like white American. That was the quote unquote science behind it. So when there's oppression, you will always find a rationalization for that oppression. So that's why Israel's doing what it's doing, because they do not see Palestinians as human beings. They don't. The
Absolutely.
government. Yeah.
100%. I feel like we could talk for hours. But what is the lasting thought you want to leave with our viewers? What you would like them to take away from this discussion?
I want to take them to take away this. You know, we talk a lot about different issues all the time. This is not a passing issue. This is genocide in real time. Like 99% of my time is going to be focused right here. I'm not going to move on to the next thing, because every day that goes by, another child is dying. So we have to keep saying, stop the occupation, cease fire. We have to stop this. We have to stop this, and we have to put as much pressure as possible. Whether it leads to it or not is beside the point. But we can't move on to the next topic, because it's going on right now. Like literally in our interview, how many children have just died? How many died of starvation, not having water, bombs, injuries? Like, this is real. This is not like some esoterical, philosophical discussion. We're trying to stop genocide right now. So I think this is where we need to be. If you haven't been out in the street, get out in the street. The protests ain't stopping. Bring a friend. If they don't have the facts, if they're brainwashed by corporate media, as I once was, get them the facts. If someone, there are many good videos that have the facts. You could bring in the data. That's what moved me 10 years ago. I started looking at the data first. Educate people who are brainwashed and then bring them out. But don't move on to the next thing. It's not just a fad thing to talk about. We're trying to save lives. That's my message.
Absolutely. Yes. A million times yes. Chuck, where can people find you?
So I've been posting a lot of @ChuckMoD1, and I'll continue to do that. And I have to say something. It's bitter. It's very bittersweet, because I've been covering protests, Palestinian protests, pro-Palestinian protests for a decade. And it is one of the hardest things to get to make any noise for the protests to get views. A lot of people didn't want to touch it. Back in the day, I would lose hundreds of followers just by covering the protest. And anti-racist people too, believe it or not. That's what's sad. That's the part that hurt me. I don't care about the other people. And one crazy thing is I've had a video get like 9 million views, another one 6 million, another one 5 million. This is unheard of. So I'm going to say this in a very bittersweet way. What I'm getting at is that the tide is really turning. That's just one metric. There are many metrics. We see polls. Those are other metrics. The tide of popular opinion is turning, particularly among young people in the street. They're not listening to the news, to the lies, and that's a good thing. But I feel funny saying that, because why is the tide turning? Because we're watching genocide in real time. And that tide, unfortunately, is fueled by 4,000 dead bodies that didn't have to happen, that this country is supporting. And there are going to be thousands more if we don't keep at it. So while I'm saying, yes, the tide is turning, and I think the views is one metric of that, we want the tide to turn without death, without genocide. That's where we really want to be. It shouldn't have to take that.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, Chuck. I just adore you. And I'm so glad to have you back.
Thank you
You
for
are
having me.
definitely one of my favorite guests, hands down. I love speaking with you.
Well, I wish I saw you in DC. I would have interviewed you. I would have stuck a phone in your face and said, "Why are you out here?"
And I would have been like, "Give me another hug." But thank you guys so much for watching. You guys know, if you have a few bucks, buy me a coffee, Joy Marie Mann. I just got a call from News Nation tonight. They're going to be covering some of my clips from the hidden camera I did on East Palestine, Ohio's EPA lead. I I recorded a 91-minute conversation with him. He did not know about, and I've exposed some pretty dark shit. So News Nation is going to be covering that throughout tomorrow. So I'm really excited. I have Elias Cepeda on Friday. He's a friend of the show. So lots of good things coming up. But again, thank you so much, Chuck.
Thank you.
Love, and thank you so much for all you're doing. You do incredible work.
You as well. And next time you're in DC, you better find me. Otherwise,
I promise.
Hunt me down.
All right. Take care, love.
You have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys, so much for watching. I just adore him. Isn't he wonderful? Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Hope to see you Friday night for Elias. We're going to talk about comparable things. Andrew and I and myself, we have always prided ourselves in talking about things that no one else is. And we have. I've done this show almost 7 years, and I've always covered like protests and unions and things like that. But this is something that, we still touch on little things here and there, but there's just not enough unbiased coverage. So I am going to keep covering it, and I'm not apologetic about that at all. But I am going to continue having guests on other things. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much for remaining supporters and for listening to me and my guests. I really appreciate it. So see you Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Much love, everyone.